We're coming from John 4, starting with the first verse, and we're going to end with the 26th verse. It is a long story, so bear with me as I read through it. That is John 4, verses 1 through 26. Now, when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard Jesus is making and baptizing more disciples than John, although it was not Jesus himself, but his disciples who baptized. He left Judea and started back to Galilee, but he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a Samaritan city called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Joseph's well was there, and Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting by the well. It was about noon. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a Samaritan woman?" Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him and would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well, and with his sons and his flocks drank from it?" Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become in them a spring of water gushing up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I may never be thirsty or have to keep coming here to draw water." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come back." The woman answered, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying, 'I have no husband,' for you have had five husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worship on this mountain, but you say that the place where people must worship is in Jerusalem." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now they are now here, where the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father seeks such as these to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know the Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will proclaim all things to us." Jesus said to her, "I am he, the one who is speaking to you." Thus far, our scripture. Do not count her out. Do not count her out. In this world that we live in, and in this culture that we abide in, women who are less than perfect, women who are less than ideal, women who are less than attractive, we don't see. John 4 gives us a glimpse into the day in the life of this nameless Samaritan woman. I like the book of John, even though he is not the teacher like Matthew, or he's not the preacher like Mark, and John is not the historian like Luke. John is considered among theologians. He's known as the theologian of the Gospels. He primarily talks about Jesus as a teacher, as a healer, as a person of great compassion. So John 4, according to scholars, is one of the longest dialogues found in the Gospels. On just that point alone, it is very significant. John 4 is a very significant dialogue with this woman at the well. John 4 opens up with Jesus, and it says Jesus had to go to Samaria. What does this mean that he had to go? Was it because he and his disciples sensed trouble? Was it because he was thirsty? Was it because he had to meet this woman? Why did Jesus have to go to Samaria? What did Jesus know that his disciples did not know? Was this had to about divine will? These stories open up with Jesus finding himself at the 6th hour sitting at the well. He then encounters this nameless Samaritan woman. This woman to me is oftentimes mislabeled and misunderstood. These preachers and even some scholars argue that she is a scorned woman, a woman full of shame and regret. The woman is oftentimes highly sexualized, married 5 times, and living with the man who was not her husband. Though they, in turn, when they do that, oftentimes they rush to their own negative conclusions about her. The goal is to decenter her and center Jesus. But I knew there was much more to this story. Oftentimes, women who we can't quite understand, we label, we disregard, we reduce them and marginalize them to fit into our own narrative about who and what we think they have to be, according to our terms. The story about her is all in the text. We must see it through another lens. And I want to say that the story about the Samaritan woman is in the text, and we must read it through the lens of how she shows up. She is not some bottom out, baseless woman. She's not a woman that is a harlot. She is none of those sorts. Jesus is about, in my terms, Jesus is about to get a run for his money. He's met the right one on the right day at the right time. She is, number one, she is politically savvy. She understands the political situation between the Jews and in Samaria. She says, how is it that you, a Jew, ask me of a drink, and I'm a Samaritan woman? So not only was she politically savvy, she wasn't just at the well. He ran into the right one. She was politically savvy. She understood the nuances of the time that she was in. She also says something that's very significant. Not only was she politically savvy, she understood the historical context of the moment that she was in. She understood the tensions between Jews and Samaria. This woman met Jesus, and she confronted him in a way that perhaps Jesus hadn't been confronted with in a long time. Here is a woman on the outskirts of town. She's at the well. I mean, Jesus shows up. She's asking him for a cup. And then she gives him this political background because he asked her a question. She's like, wait a minute here. You do know who I am and what we are. We know we really don't do this thing. And so she's not only politically savvy, but she says something that's very interesting. She calls him sir. And it begins to wonder if he may be a prophet. So not only is she politically savvy, but she has a profound understanding of both Jewish theology and also Samaritan theology. But that shift in sir, right? There was a shift when she said sir. There was something that clicked inside of her that recognized that this is a different kind of guy here, and I must respond to him in a different kind of way. Jesus knew that she had the intellectual capital to handle this powerful moment of declaring his divinity. This was a moment where Jesus had not declared his divinity in a way until this particular moment with this woman. He knew that it was fertile ground. She was sharp, she politically savvy. It was the right time. It was the right place. Perhaps he was tired. They say he was tired, he was thirsty, all those things. But I understand in order for Jesus to really declare his divinity, the ground had to be right, with the right person, with the right mindset, with the right sense of self of who she is. It showed up in this woman. He had not on regular terms spoke about this and who he is, even with his disciples. So I found it very interesting that he had declared that level of divinity with his disciples, but he decides to declare it with this woman, this nameless Samaritan woman. And there's a part in the story where it gets a little tricky because Jesus asked her, go call your husband and come back here. Now, most preachers traditionally, that is when they light into her. Oh, she got 5 husbands. Oh, the man she with ain't her man. She living in sin. She's shacking up. Her boo is at home. All those things that they say about this woman. But I found it very interesting that in order for Jesus to solidify his divinity, he needed the woman to be honest. She was politically savvy. She was historian in that case. She understood how they worship on certain mountains. She understood Jacob's well. She understood all of these things. But there was something else that he needed from her. It wasn't the five husbands, because the story doesn't even talk about the five husbands. It's kind of mentioned in passing. And Jesus asked her about the man that he identified that the man that she's with is not her husband. And when she says, "You are correct," Jesus knew that this was the woman that he can go deep with. He says, okay, she's a woman of truth. She's politically savvy. She understands the moment historically. I can do a deep reveal here. And Carolyn Might says something about truth. She says, liars don't heal. She said, you can take all the green grass and all the herbs and the vitamins, but if you are a liar, she said, the body knows. And so Jesus knew that in order for him to move from that moment to the next moment, because he was on his way to Jerusalem, he was on his way somewhere. In order for him to move from just this obscure kind of guy that people are knowing, his disciples know, he's doing this healing, he's doing this kind of teaching, to declare his divinity, the ground had to be right in truth. And this woman was that moment where he identified her and she did not run away from it. She said, sir, you are correct. So some preachers love to dig into the five husbands, and that's absolutely fine. But the story doesn't say anything about them. Perhaps they all died on her. We don't know. Perhaps she was a divorced woman. It doesn't mention anything. But this idea of five husbands allows many preachers to kind of sexualize her, shame her, reduce her, decenter her. But John 4 is really about her. The way that I read John 4, she is very centered. And that journey is critically important. And Jesus could not lay ground until he identified that. Not only that, in that moment, he had to show her that she was a prophet. And that prophet was knowing who she is and who she was. She, wait a minute here, you're absolutely right. The one I'm with is not mine. You're absolutely right. And then he says the ability to tell the truth is critical in this moment, because in order for her to drink the water, in order for her to never thirst again, it had to be from a foundation of truth. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I had five, and the one I'm with is not my husband. Jesus knows that she was politically savvy. She was wrong in her theological approach. He knows that she has her hand on the pulse of the times that she's living in. This woman showed up clear, powerful, astute, engaged, and she showed up fully endowed in her skills and ability. She didn't shrink. She didn't cower. She didn't fall back. She didn't play small. She didn't come to play with Jesus. She was that kind of woman. Do not count her out. Jesus had to take this woman seriously. She said, I have no husband. Jesus began to say, for you have had five husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true. I have heard certain preachers talk about this moment, but that's not the moment I really want to focus in on. The story doesn't say much about these husbands, as I mentioned before. So I don't want to spend any time talking about the husbands, and I don't want to spend any time talking about the man she with, because Jesus didn't. And then she said something that was profound. After the the identifying of her status, her owning herself, all parts of herself, she said, sir, I see that you are a prophet. Not only is politically savvy, not only is she theologically astute, and not only is she clear and strong, but she has an intuition that she trusts. She trusted her gut. She had an intimate relationship with that small inner voice. We call it her superconscious, female intuition. We all have it. Some call it the still small voice. It says to us to trust it, to follow it. Sir, I see that you are a prophet. She tapped into it. She relied on it. My grandmother used to say, something is going on with you. I can't put my hand on it, but it's going to come out either in the rinse or the wash. There's something going on. That moment of understanding, that intuition, that feeling, that knowingness that something is off. Jesus is now ready to speak to her, who he really is. The ground is right. She's savvy, she's smart, she's honest, she's not cowering, she's unafraid. He said, I can tell this woman my real truths. It's ironic in Jesus' ministry that he always does a big reveal with women. And I love that about him. It was the Samaritan woman who first identified that Jesus as the Messiah. It was Martha who he expressed her belief. She expressed her belief in Jesus and his ability to raise her brother from the dead. It was Mary to whom he first appeared after his resurrection and to whom he entrusted the delivery of the news to his apostles. Jesus always makes a big reveal to women. Jesus trusts women. Finally, Jesus says to her, I he who you're speaking of. It doesn't, so first of all, I want to say today, it doesn't serve you or anyone else when you play small. God has not created us to play small. That's number one. Number two, speak truth to power. Open your mouth and speak up on matters of importance to you. This is not a time to silence yourself. It's all in that woman's story. And number three, claim all of who you are. Don't leave any parts of yourself outside the door. All of who you are is useful. Be like that Samaritan woman who was smart, savvy, engaged, trustworthy, and she had influence. Well, David, how do you know that she has influence? She went back to the city, tell the men in the city to come see a man who told me all about myself. I do believe that if she was some harlot or she was some prostitute or she was some loose woman or she was some woman who was marginalized on the outskirts, these men would not have listened to her. She had influence and she used that influence to tell this story to compel them to come. Don't count her out. Don't count yourself out. She was smart, she was savvy, she was intellectually stimulating, she was tough. She gave Jesus a run for his money, and she compelled the men to come. Don't count her out, and don't count yourself